Everybody, this is Larry, and I'm here today. Chef Nani has allowed me to make buttermilk biscuits and gravy by myself. So I am the sous chef who's going to be cooking this by myself. Nani is here standing by. She's right there watching me, keeping a watchful eye on me. She did do the measurements for all this stuff for us for our biscuits today, and we are making buttermilk biscuits and gravy. So I've already pre-measured all of our ingredients. Actually, Nani did that for us. So here we have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. It's very basic. There's only 5 ingredients in this. We have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. We're going to mix 1 tablespoon of sugar. That is definitely optional. Everybody doesn't like to do that, but it does give it a little different taste and flavor. You can add more to it if you want a sweeter biscuit, and that's kind of up to you. And then we have 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to add that in there. And then our final dry ingredient is 1 tablespoon of baking powder. Okay, so all that's mixed in together. I'm just going to give it a little stir. Okay. And then so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1 stick of butter. And what I did is I did cube up the butter here. We're adding 1 stick of butter, and we want to make sure that our butter is nice and cold. If it's nice and cold, it's going to make for a better texture and more flaky biscuit when we make that. So I am using a mashed potato masher, and so some people have, I forgot what it's called, but it's a thing that's round and it's got the little slits in it, and they do that. This works just as well. I don't have one of those. I don't know the name of it, but I use a mashed potato masher. And so what we're doing is we're trying to get the butter incorporated into the flour. Some people will just do it by hand and mix it together, but the consistency that you want on the butter and the flour is what's called just a little pea shape on there. So this is going to be a lot of mashing and getting it together. Another option that you can do is you can freeze your stick of butter and then use a grater, same size that you would normally do with the cheese, and grate your butter. So when you do that, it gets it nice and a good size, and it makes it easier to put it in here, and it should make for good flaky biscuits. Okay, so right here, this is pretty good consistency that we have right here. We could work it a little bit longer if we want. That's up to you, but this is still going to make for some nice biscuits. Okay. Now we're going to add 1 cup of buttermilk. So I didn't have regular buttermilk, so I made buttermilk on my own. All that is 1 cup of milk added with 1 tablespoon of vinegar. So you can use vinegar or you can use lemon juice. But something acidic like that, you add that to the milk and then it creates your buttermilk. So you want to let it sit 5 or 10 minutes. This is sat a little bit longer. And so it doesn't have the regular consistency of milk. You can see, I don't know if you can tell, there's little lumps in there, and that's from the curdling of those 2 coming together. So we're going to add that in there. Okay, once that's added, now I'm just going to take a fork and I'm going to mix this together. So we want our mixture not to be too dry or not to be too wet. So you kind of have to see how this does. I don't know, sometimes it feels like it's a little wet, sometimes it feels like it's dry, but you definitely do not want it to be dry. So in this case, as you can see, there's still regular flour down there at the bottom. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a little bit more milk in here. Not going to add a lot. I have some pulled aside. Just going to pour a little bit in, not too much. Pour that in, and then I'm just going to continue to mix to make sure that I get all the dry ingredients incorporated together. So those are the 5 ingredients that it takes to make homemade biscuits. It's very easy, very simple, and after this will be the fun part. Okay, so here is our dough. This is what it should look like. It's a little tacky or sticky. There's no flour on the bottom of this. So now we get to roll out our dough. So there's a couple different things that you can do. Normally what I do is I will spray the counter. I've already wiped the counter down so everything is good and clean. So normally I would spray the counter with cooking spray, and then you add your flour, put it on there. The reason I do that is because I don't like for it to stick on the counter, and then that's more to clean up. So add this to here. Some people do it on a cutting board or other instruments that they use to do that. I just do it right on the counter. And then we're going to turn our dough on to the counter. Okay, so the bowl came out pretty clean, came out very clean. So just take that, got that, we're all set. So now we have the dough on the counter. I'm going to add some flour on the top, and then now is the time to knead the dough. You have to be very careful in kneading the dough, because if you over knead the dough, you're going to make hard biscuits. Okay, so I'm going to take it, I'm just going to turn it over, push it down. Yeah, there's still some stickiness, it's getting on my hands, but that's okay. Push it down, we're working it. Work the dough. I'm going to make sure that I keep some flour down here on the counter. And it's okay that there's more flour getting into this, because remember, it is a little sticky anyway. Okay, so now that I've kneaded it, I think we're pretty good. I don't want to over knead it, as I said. I can still feel that this is cold, and we want our mixture to be cold as well. The colder that the butter and the is when it goes into the oven, it makes it better to rise. Okay, so we're all set here. As you can see, flour is dropping off, but this is going to be good when it's time to roll these out. It's not going to stick to the counter. Okay, we'll be back in a second. Okay, so now it's time to roll out our dough. So we have the dough here, we have on the counter. We don't have a rolling pin, so we use what's just next natural. This is our rolling pin. So just use a glass. And so I'm going to roll this out. I want to keep it about 3/4 of an inch in height when you roll it out. And I roll it and I turn it, because as you can see here, there's areas on here that is still a little wet. It's not covered with the flour. And so, like I said, I don't want it sticking to the counter. So I'm picking it up, turning it over as we go. Okay, as I'm working this is good. Sometimes I have used a can and rolled it out. So use whatever you have, but if you have a rolling pin, that would be fabulous. Okay, so as I roll this out, there's a couple different things that you can do when you roll it out. You can roll it out and roll it super flat and then double fold it. So then that produces just another set of layers for you on doing that. So right here, we have about the height and the thickness that we want for cooking this. And so I have a couple different sizes of biscuit cutters here. So we have the small, medium, and large. We're going to go with the medium one. And so what we're going to do is we're going to roll it around in the flour, and then that's just going to lightly coat it on the inside, and that helps for it not to stick as well. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to cut it, and then we're going to go ahead and put it onto our pan. I've already pre-greased the pan. The oven is already set to 400 degrees. So once we get them cut, get them on our pan, we can get them in the oven and cook. They'll cook in like 15 or 20 minutes. So at this time, I'm going to have head chef Nani is going to come in, and she's going to assist with this portion of our demonstration. So come on in, Nani. How are you?
Good.
Okay, you're going to come on this side here. And then so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the biscuits. After I cut them, you're going to set them on there. Leilani's going to try and make a flour. So that's what the goal is when we put them on there.
Yep.
When you do set the biscuits on to the cooking sheet, you don't want them to touch, but you do want them to be close to each other. Okay, so if they're close to each other, then as they rise, they'll rise and they'll push up on each other, which is what you really want. Now, when you cut the biscuits, you don't want to push down and turn, because when you do that, what it does is it seals the edges and it prevents the biscuits from rising. So we're just pushing this in, we're cutting straight down, and we're lifting straight out. So this is pretty good. Looks like we're probably going to just get 8 out of this one. If I would have rolled it a little better, I could have got 9 on this first run. Okay, so we have 8. And then I'm going to lift this up and take the extra out of here. And this is where Leilani is then going to put them on, oh, excuse me, she said it's Nani. And that's where Chef Nani is now going to go ahead and put them on our cooking pan. Okay, go ahead. So as Chef Nani is doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest of the dough that was left, and we're just going to work this again. And we got to re-roll these. This extra dough does not get wasted. This one, I got a little sticky one right here, which is not good. We're going to put that side up. That's not going to be a attractive looking one, I don't think, when we're all done. But it is going to taste good. So you can go ahead and use that one too. Oh, that's a pretty flour. Good job. Good job. So what I am going to have to do is I am going to need a little bit more flour to put on the counter here. As I said, part of it stuck. So I'm going to take a little bit more flour. Just going to sprinkle it over. And then roll it out. Do the same process again. Still not trying to over knead it. I learned how to make biscuits from my mother. She, as far as I know, every Sunday morning she used to cook biscuits. And we had biscuits for breakfast every Sunday morning before church. And so I would sit in the kitchen with my mom, and she would let me help her in the kitchen, and I would learn how to make biscuits. And the first time that I ever made biscuits on my own, my mom didn't come out, didn't help me. I did everything that I was supposed to do. I kneaded the biscuits, I cut them, got everything set the way they were supposed to do. We put them in the oven and they cooked. They came out nice and brown. So to help them brown, what we're going to do is we're going to melt some butter, and then we'll melt the butter and we'll brush it over the top. And what that does is then that takes away from the flour that's on top, so that helps get rid of that. And then it helps give it a nice, good golden brown color. Well, as I was saying, I made those beautiful biscuits. We got to the table. We said our grace before it was time to eat. And needless to say, my biscuits were super hard. The reason was I over kneaded the dough. So if you over knead the dough, you're going to have hard biscuits. And so my oldest brother, oops, shouldn't have said who it was. Somebody in our family took liberty at the table to then pick up the biscuit, and he literally went, "Oh, I broke the plate because your biscuits are so hard." And so I never lived that one down. I wanted to cry, but my parents, as loving as they are, they proceeded to eat the biscuits as if they were the best biscuits in the world. And that then made me want to continue to make homemade biscuits. Love you, big bro.
Hello, we're back. Now we're gonna put the melted butter on the biscuits.
So we melted some butter in the microwave. We're going to paint it on top of the biscuits, and then that's going to say, as I said, that's going to help it with the browning process. There's a couple different things that you can do with the biscuits. You can add different things into it. There are times where we have made cheddar biscuits, and so in the incorporation process, before you put the milk, you can add the shredded cheese into that. You put that in there, you mix it, and you continue the same way. When we do the cheddar biscuits, we don't roll them and do them like this. We kind of keep them rustic, kind of like Red Lobster. I think they're the ones that have the cheddar bay biscuits. And so we leave it rustic, and we make what we call drop biscuits. And you just take a big spoon, and you just take the same size spoon, you pour it in, and you let it cook. And then you have some nice cheddar biscuits. So Leilani has done a great job in putting the butter. So now we're going to go ahead and put this into the oven. Our oven is set at 400 degrees. We're going to check it after like 15 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes. We'll check it and make sure everything is good. I'm going to open the oven here, and one thing we always do is make sure we open it and stand back because the heat comes burrowing out. Okay, and I'm going to take this tray, and we're going to set the tray right in the middle. Being very careful and cautious. Okay, right in the middle, and close it up, and we're ready to go. So my mother used to tell us whenever she was baking stuff, you cannot be loud in the house because you're going to make my cake fall. And so, same thing, the biscuits are in the oven, so you need to be quiet so they don't fall. I don't think that that's true, but my mom used to do that, and we used to stay quiet in the house. So, shh, bye. Okay, now it's time for us to do our gravy. So for the gravy, I have about 3 pounds of pork sausage that I've already rendered down, and I've already drained the fat off of this. So what we want to do with this now, and I did do it in the cast iron skillet, what we're going to do now is I'm going to move this over, and because I'm making this for a large quantity of people, I have a bigger pot that I'm going to use to make the gravy in. So first thing that we have to do is we're going to add our oil and our flour, and that's going to make our roux. And so the basic formula or ratio that you want to use is whatever amount of oil or butter, or in this case the pork fat that you use, you're going to use the same amount of flour. Okay, so this is rendered down to about 1/2 cup of the fat. So I'm going to put the fat in there. I have my skillet turned up, and then so like I said, this we're going to make the roux. Pot was already hot, so now I'm just going to get 1/2 cup of flour here, and we'll be going. So you can use any kind of sausage obviously that you want. Some people make a sage dressing or sage gravy when they do this normally, and so there is sage sausage out there that you can use in order to give you some sage flavor. I typically don't like to do sage because it can be kind of a strong flavor. Okay, so here we have rendered down our flour with the fat. Now what you really want to make sure to do is that you cook out the flour taste. So that's why it's very important to do this process in the beginning, to mix your fat, whatever type of fat that you're using, along with the flour, so that you get that cooked out of it. Okay, so at this point, because we're doing it for our biscuits, we're not going to add anything else like onion or garlic or anything like that in it, unless that's something that you like with your biscuits. So we have this here mixed up real well. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add our milk to this. So the good thing about what we're doing here is the fact that we're going to start with 2 cups of milk to get that in there, get it going, get it cooking. And then as it starts thickening up, you can add more milk to it. Then as you add more milk, you can get it to the consistency that you want. So I already have 4 cups of milk measured out, which is what I think I'm pretty much going to use. I'm going to start by pouring in half of this. So that's about 2 cups right there. Pour that 2 cups in, and we start to mix it together. So what I'm going to do is I am going to turn the heat up on this right now so that I can get a boil on the milk as this is coming together. I'm going to continue to stir it, and then as it stirs and comes together, I'm going to add more milk as it thickens up, and then we're going to add our sausage into there. Okay, so here we have a good mixture of our roux. It is thickening up pretty well. So at this point, I turn the heat down, and so I'm going to add a 2nd cup of milk to this. And I should be stirring as I'm pouring it in, but I'm not that talented yet. As you see, my pot is turning. Okay, and like I said, don't be afraid of having too much liquid in there, because the longer you let it cook, it is going to cook down. What you do not want to do is add raw flour into this if it's too thick, if you think it's too thick, because it's going to really mess up the taste of the gravy. So now as I have this added in here together, what I'm going to do is I am going to add a little bit of salt, okay, because salt basically mixed with the flour, it's going to help take out some of that taste. Okay, so just going to do a couple pinches of salt in here into our mixture, and then later I am going to add pepper to this as well. So there's our salt, put that in there, and when we get towards our finished product, then we're going to taste it again and see if it's missing or if it needs anything else. Okay, so at this point I'm going to go ahead and add in all of this sausage. So most people, if you have sausage gravy, if you don't have sausage in there, then it's not sausage gravy. It's just gravy. Adding the sausage in there, this is going to be really good. If I'm having biscuits and gravy, then I really want to have some sausage in my gravy. Otherwise, I feel like I'm being cheated. So, but those of you who don't like pork or don't do meat, you can do turkey sausage. That would be good as well. And if you're accustomed to cooking with turkey sausage, you can adjust your seasoning based upon that. Okay, so here we have a good mixture of this together. Lots of pork in here. So I think everybody's going to be happy with this. So we'll take one last look at this as we stir it. Once again, I'm going to leave it on low and just let it simmer until we get to the proper thickness that we want and consistency. All right, here we go. Okay, so here we have our gravy. It has simmered for a while. We simmered it on low. And so for this, I'm actually going to make it thinner than what I really want to use it for, because we're not going to eat this till a little bit later. So that way it doesn't become too thick. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a taste here. So I'm going to get a little bit of sausage and some of our gravy in here. Give it a taste. And as Chef Nani says, no double dipping. Okay. Flavor's good, not bad. I want a little bit more salt in it, so I'm just going to add just a little bit more salt. If my mom is watching this, she's probably screaming right now because she's going to say I've added too much salt in it. But salt is just for enhancing the flavor. And I'll stir that around. Give you one more look at the consistency that we have. And this looks like a mean pot of gravy right here. This is going to go great with our homemade biscuits. Yeah, that's good. So this is going to cook down a little bit longer, and it's going to thicken up a little bit, and then it's going to be perfect. Okay, now it's time to check out our biscuits. I'm going to open the door here. I'm going to stand back and let that heat come out first. And here we are. There are our biscuits. And set them here. And here is our sausage gravy. That's going to be a nice pairing right there. So if you've never done biscuits and gravy before, what you want to do is you take your biscuit. Most people cut them in half, lay them open face, and then just ladle on the gravy goodness on top of those biscuits. I'm sure you're going to enjoy those. Have fun. Bye now.